Hey, how's it going? Myles here at Tactical Hyve. Welcome to this week's dry fire and live fire session. We've talked a lot about how to increase your speed in the past, I guess it's been 5 or 6 weeks. And now we're switching gears and we're going to go back to a little bit of trigger control, specifically how you can slap the trigger while maintaining accuracy and speed. If you hear a lot of instructors when they teach in the industry, they'll talk about things like surprise break, or for example, in our series, we've talked about reset and prep. And that's all about different ways to deal with trigger control. Some may be more valid than others, but today I want to talk about slapping the trigger, because we won't always have that time and space to, for example, take the slack out. We might be surprised. A threat might just pop out of nowhere and we're going to be slapping that trigger. So in this video, I want to discuss some ways that you can use dry fire and live fire to ensure that when you do slap the trigger, you'll maintain your accuracy. So if you're interested, stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So for this dry fire session, I do recommend using the dry fire mag because this is going to allow you to really smash that trigger. Like we're really slapping it, we're surprised, and it's just going to automatically reset the trigger. If you are not using a dry fire mag, or maybe dry fire mag does not have a dry fire mag for your model pistol yet, then you can use your actual pistol and just smash the trigger, even though it doesn't reset. So what we're going to be doing for the dry fire part of this is we're recalling that context. We don't have the time and space to take the slack out. If we do, then that's great, but something might pop out of nowhere. Maybe, it's a home defense situation. I already have my hand on my gun here like this, my two hands. Something pops out. I might just make a contact shot, or because of the adrenaline, whatever it might be, I might not have the time to prep my trigger. So what we are going to do is you're going to use your pistol, whether it's a red dot or iron sights, and you're going to present out to a target. And you want to pick something small at your place, your office, or wherever you're doing your dry fire. Maybe it is a 3-inch circle, or maybe it is a 1-inch paster, whatever it is, you want it to be very small. And you're going to line up your front sight or your red dot with that very small target. If you're using a red dot, you are going to have that red dot right on that paster, and you're going to smash the trigger. And you are going to pay attention to whether the dot moves off line from that paster, whatever it is, and you need to pay attention in what direction it moved. What we're trying to get to, though, is a point where you're smashing the trigger and that red dot stays within the target zone. So if the target was the Tactical Hyve icon right here, and I had the red dot here right in the middle, I want to smash the trigger and it stays right here. And I want to be able to smash the trigger multiple times and that dot does not move. If, for example, I break those dry fire shots, whether you're using the dry fire mag or not, and the dot is moving out of the target zone, we have some work to do. Now, you may recall from previous trigger control videos, there are certain principles you have to follow when it comes to the proper trigger squeeze. For example, only moving your trigger finger and moving it straight to the rear. Those are 2 huge ones. But when slapping the trigger, sometimes we may, again, adrenaline, whatever it is, the chaos, it's forcing us not to follow those principles. We do want to adhere to them as much as possible, and that's why we practice them. But in reality, we might veer away from the ideal. So if you are smashing that trigger, slapping it hard, smashing that trigger, and you're seeing the dot move a lot, now it's going to be a matter of grip, how we're fine-tuning our grip, our human vice, to minimize the amount of movement. Now, there's a lot of ways to approach this, and there's different techniques. Okay, so techniques are a matter of style. But what I do want to emphasize is this, okay? Most of you are going to see your shots going down. And this might not be the anticipation, okay? A lot of people, when their shots are going down, they're anticipating the shot, but this could be that you are squeezing so hard, okay, slapping that trigger so hard that you're also activating the 3 amigos, and all of a sudden, the dot and the actual muzzle goes down, right? So what you want to do is you can think about different things you're doing with your human vice, AKA your grip, and you want to think about what you can do to minimize that movement. Yes, it is a trigger control issue where if you're milking the grip, moving all of your fingers, you're breaking that principle of just moving your trigger finger. But we talked about the situation here is where you're very stressed, it's chaos is happening, and maybe you're veering away from the ideal. So in this situation, if we know that we can't rely on a proper trigger squeeze because of the context, the situation, we now need to also look at different layers of insurance, so to speak, and that is our grip, okay? So lots of different ways, as I mentioned, lots of different techniques, but I'm just going to explain one. So if we see that dot, every time we're squeezing that trigger, even during dry fire, that dot or that front sight is always dipping outside of the target zone. That means our muzzle is going down, right? So we know we can't really work on trigger control right now, although that would be the most ideal. Now let's take a look at what we can do with our hands, our grip, to help minimize that. One thing I'm going to just share with you, lots of different techniques, I'm just going to share one for this video, is to ensure you have good contact with the back strap. What I mean by that is, take a look over here, all right? So I'm going to exaggerate. Notice how there's a lot of space between the back strap and the heel of my firing hand palm. So if I squeeze or slap the trigger, notice where this grip is going to move. It just moves down. Okay, I'll show that again. So right here, maybe I'm gripping this way here, but notice there's all this space here. I slap the trigger, the gun moves down. Why? Because there's all of this space for the grip to actually move into. So if I was surprised, once again, I'm presenting, I'm just going to show one hand, it goes down. So in order to fix that, we want to have a solid backstop along this back strap. Remember, this is just one technique. So I'm going to make sure that I have contact the entire time with this back strap, and I'm putting good pressure into it, just enough that my gun is not going to dip a lot. So now I would approach my 1-inch target, whatever it is, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to smash that trigger, now focusing on putting more pressure on the back strap. And if you do it correctly, you'll notice that it's either going to minimize the downward movement or eliminate it. Now, this is only one technique, but the idea here is if you guys are seeing movement with your iron sight or red dot when you're doing this dry fire, and you are purposely putting more disruption into your trigger squeeze because you're pretending it's a chaotic environment, now you need to rely on your grip. Okay, so you're going to do what you can to ensure that dot does not move outside the target by experimenting with the pressures of your hand. And you can only do this successfully if you know where your dot or your front sight is moving. I use the example of if your dot is moving down. So I gave you one fix. What happens if your dot is moving up? Dot moving to the left, dot is moving to the right. I can't share all the answers with you because there's lots of different techniques to address certain movements in your sights. But that's the whole point here of this dry fire session. You are going to pick a very difficult target, smash that trigger, and notice where your sights are moving. If you do this correctly, then live fire is going to be much easier in the sense that you are going to aim at a target and your goal is to smash that trigger while maintaining accuracy. Then you'd move further back, to the point where you're slapping the trigger and you can still successfully hit your target. And you're going to be able to do this because you're not disrupting your sights. This is the perfect example of a dry fire exercise that can translate very well into live fire. So make sure you're very strict on yourself during dry fire. Don't let that dot or front sight move. And now as we do live fire, it's going to be very easy. Now let's dive into the live fire segment of today's video. If you did dry fire correctly and that dot's not moving, then this is going to be very easy. I have a number of different targets downrange. The first target that I'm going to be focusing on is about 10 yards. Then as I get a few successful reps, then I'm going to increase the distance and or difficulty of the target. You don't really need steel targets or anything like that. You could be at an indoor range and just move that paper target further and further as you are successful with each iteration. So I'm going to start off with this target at about 10 yards. And if you did your dry fire correctly, you are just going to mimic everything. You're going to slap the trigger. And the idea is to minimize the movement of that dot. And if you do it correctly, you are going to hit your target. You can start off with just single shots. So I have this BC steel at about 10 yards. I have my dot here. You can start on target. You don't have to do this from the draw or anything like that. So I'm here. My finger is off the trigger, okay, on the frame. And now I'm going to slap my trigger. And I hit my target so I know everything is fine. But I do want to establish consistency. So I'm here. I'm not going to do a lot of reps, but if you could do a full mag and you're hitting that target, really slapping into it, then you're at a pretty good position to increase the difficulty. So I'm going to do this one again. My finger is on the frame, just like this. Like I don't know what's going on, but then a threat surprises me, so now I have to break the shot from here. So I'm here on target, and I break the shot. Okay, so the idea is I'm doing it from this position right here, and I'm slapping the trigger. So let's pretend I did that for a mag and I'm consistent, I'm hitting it, everything is looking good. Then I would increase the distance and or decrease the size of the target. Here I have an array of different targets. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go a little bit further. The target is smaller. It's a circle downrange. Plus, it is probably 7 yards further. So this is about 17 yards and a small circle. Actually, maybe I would say 15 yards. So I'm going to have my sights on that circle here. It's a 12-inch circle, and I'm going to break the shot. I missed it. Okay, so I'm going to do it again here. Hit, hit, hit. So the first one I missed, but the idea here is, again, if you see, you should be paying attention to your dot or your front sight every single rep here. So that first one, I knew where my dot moved. I didn't hit the target, so I adjusted my grip pressures to make sure that the dot was steady. So now, if you are successful at this range, now you can move it further back or decrease the size of the target. The main purpose of this exercise is to control your dot as you're slapping the trigger. Remember, the context is we don't always have the time and space to have a really good trigger squeeze. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way down 25 yards BC steel. So it's compared to this 10 yards, it's going to be a much smaller target. It's going to be harder. So I'm going to keep my finger on the frame here. You guys can do this with a timer, but as you're starting off, you don't need to. The timer is going to make things more realistic because you're going to react. This time, right now, as I'm explaining the exercise, it's more about you just telling yourself when you're going to go. But if you want a more challenging exercise, you're going to use a timer. So I'm on target here. I'm looking, I have my dot on that BC steel. Then when I'm ready, I'm just going to slap the trigger. I missed. It was to the right, so I think it was actually above the right shoulder. So I felt myself squeezing, but healing too much on that rep. So that would explain why it kind of went up. All right, so I'm going to do it again here. My finger's on the frame. Then I'm going to break the shot. Good. That was now to the left. I felt the shot move to the left this time. And it was because I felt my finger push on the frame of the gun. So at 25 yards, all these little movements are exaggerated. But you get the idea here. We're paying attention to the dot to determine what we need to change with our grip. So I'm here on the frame again. I'm going to break the shot. Okay, so I got two, then the third one went up again, and I felt myself. I put a little too much pressure. So at 25 yards, this is something where in reality, you would probably have more time at 25 yards. You would probably have the time and space to now prep your trigger, then break that shot. But we are pushing it out very far and still slapping the trigger from the frame because it is an exercise. This is supposed to mimic if someone was up close and we had to break that shot. If someone was at 25 yards, chances are, it's not to say that it would always be the case, but chances are we'll have the opportunity to choose a trigger manipulation that is better suited for the difficulty of the target and the distance of the target. Give those exercises out a try. This is going to really help you maintain accurate shots and do them quickly when you're surprised. There's no magic to this. You do have to practice, but you do also have to be sensitive to what your grip pressures are like. You are the human vice. So if you see your dot and your front sight moving all over the place, experiment where you're applying pressure and tension to minimize that movement. If you guys liked the video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Let us know what you thought in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. We release a video every single day. So if you want to know what the topics are, make sure to hit that bell. See you guys next week.